He's Dave and I'm Dallas, and we have opinions on just about everything. Sometimes they're on point, and sometimes they go down better with a glass of wine. Join us. This is the Wine and Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the wrap-up of our coverage of Severance Season 1. This is, of course, as always, Wine and, the show where we pair wine with movies, TV, music, books, and comics. And maybe one day we'll pair it with, I don't know, hard-working screenwriters.
There you go.
You know,
there
they could use a glass. Or two.
Or three.
Or, fuck it, give them the bottle. You know, you won't see them for a little while after that, but that's okay. They've earned it. They've earned a day. They've earned a night. Don't give it to them during the day. That could be bad. But maybe at night, you know, a little Go Puff delivery at the end of the day. Just like that'll be a nice little something. I've seen Barton Fink. I know how hard
That's
their lives are.
Some brownies, some special brownies.
Exactly. Now, that this is going to be about TV writing. We're going to be talking about tonight. So maybe UHF. I've seen UHF, and I'm pretty sure that's how TV writing works. So exactly how Weird Al did everything on that station. So you know. You need some alcohol to do stuff like that. So I think we gotta send that their way. All right. But before we get there, once again, as always, everybody, if you like what you hear today, please make sure to hit that follow or subscribe button. It really helps the podcast grow, reach new listeners until one day, instead of saying Hail Lumen, we'll all say Hail Dave and Dallas.
That's
and
right.
I would really like that. But if you love us, please leave a 5-star review. If you don't love us, send us an email and tell us why you don't love us. Oh, I don't want to hail some random podcaster. Do you know how many podcasters are out there these days? What makes you so special? Okay. Well, send that exact email to wine, the letter N, as in not going to stop podcasting, POD, as in podium, as in the podium I'm on right now, winenpod@gmail.com. We are also on Substack. Substack subscribers are the first to know when new episodes drop, can interact with us there, gain access to bonus pairings, articles, interactive polls, pairing directories, which are coming very soon, and more. We're working on it, but there will be more. And that is wineand.substack.com.
That's right.
We would love to see and hear from you there. And since you're already doom scrolling, go ahead and find us on all the socials under our profile name, Wine and Pod. That is wine, the full and in that situation. So wine, A-N-D, P-O-D, wine and pod. We're on IG Threads, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And to wrap this up, know that most of the time we discuss things we love, though sometimes we dissect something that we quote-unquote hate. But whatever it is you love, whatever it is you hate, there is a wine that pairs with that.
That's right.
Okay, today we are wrapping up our coverage of Season 1 of what we think is the best TV show of 2022.
Kind of is.
Severance.
Yeah.
We've already covered the history of Severance Season 1, at least what's available to the public. We then covered episodes 1 through 3, 4 through 6, and 7 through 9. And now today, we are wrapping it all up in style with a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious guest, Chris Black. No, I'm not actually going to do that.
Yeah, Chris.
Black. Everybody.
Hello, what's up?
So Chris is a screenwriter and showrunner on an insane list of TV shows you know, and at least mostly love, including but not limited to Weird Science, Sliders, Xena Warrior Princess, Cleopatra 2525, if anyone remembers that one, that double billed with the Jack of all trades with Bruce Campbell in the same hour slot, until it took over the hour slot. That was a fun bit. And Desperate Housewives, yes, that actually happened. He wrote on Desperate Housewives. Hawaii, where are all my other Hawaii fans at?
Just the one. There's just the one. I'm joking.
Yeah, that sounds okay. Fuck you guys. Anyway. Ugly Betty, Lone Star, Outcast, Invincible, the animated show, Severance, which is why he's here with us today, and most recently, Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, which he is the co-creator and showrunner of alongside Matt Fraction, one of the king gods of comics.
By the way, Chris, we're just going to say this right now. You have to promise to return so we can do an episode on the Monster series. I'm just saying.
Oh sure.
Saying.
I would be
as a kaiju freak, this is kind of like tweaking me out right now. So.
Oh no, I'd be honored. And I know we're here to talk about Severance, but working with Matt Fraction. Matt Fraction is one of the greatest human beings I've ever met or worked with in my life. I mean, not only just an unbelievably creative and talented dude, but just the sweetest, nicest guy. Probably, I mean, he and Dan Erickson are probably neck and neck for the two nicest guys I've ever worked with in this business. Working on Monarch, well, there were two things. One, being able to kind of play in the kaiju universe,
and iconic characters too. Yeah,
the iconic characters. I mean, going back to the Toho is our partners in the show, and we got to go to Japan. We went to Toho Studios. Where Akira Kurosawa made his movies, and where the original.
Just so you know, Chris, this is pornographic for me. So go on.
Oh no, it's amazing, and it has the honor of working in that arena, and then just the absolute joy and pleasure of working with Matt Fraction made that just one of the best jobs I ever had. And just hearing you were just reading my IMDb page. Usually they hit the highlights, like the good shows. You just went all of them.
Trust me, I skipped quite a few. It's pretty long.
Well, no, I'm amazed that did you watch Cleopatra 2525?
Back in the day, yes, I did. Alongside Jack of All, I was so bummed when Jack of All Trades got canceled because that was my hour. I was really into it back in the day. So
that was like one of the most fun hours on television. Truly, those two worlds back to back.
It was funny how the business had changed. I mean, that was the mid '90s, and that's when I started my career, and I started on Weird Science, and I was talking to someone about this the other day about my career has kind of spanned, the evolution of television in the last, 25 years. I started out on Weird Science was on USA, it was basic cable, and then worked in syndication, Xena, which was a great experience, in Cleopatra. I mean, Rob Tapper, who's married to Lucy Lawless, who was the producer of Xena, had like 5 shows on the air at the same time. I mean, he had Xena, Hercules, Cleo, Jack of All Trades. It was like he was one of the most successful television producers working at the time, and that whole syndicated, model is gone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I worked in broadcast. I did shows. I mean, like you rattled off a few of them. I spent my time at ABC on Desperate and Ugly Betty. Ugly Betty was a great experience. I loved working on that show. And
that seemed like a lot of fun, just all around, actually.
A lot of fun. Silvio Orta, who isn't with us anymore, was just one of the best showrunners I ever worked with. And working with that cast was a dream. I was there the last 2 seasons when we shot it in New York, which was just a blast. And then, out of broadcast, I did, I did Outcast with Robert Kirkman, also a great guy. That was premium cable. It was HBO Cinemax, and now I'm in the last few years I've been working on streaming stuff. Yeah. So it's like it feels like I've sort of been there. I mean, maybe it's just as a test, how old I am or how long I've been in this business. But I
actually that brings a really interesting question to my mind in terms of the comparison of working with a streamer and working with a network and then basic cable. How do those experiences sort of compare as, boots on the ground writer and showrunner?
Well, it's funny because, you were hearing those credits. They're very eclectic. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of, early in my career, there was a lot of genre, and I love genre. I worked on Star Trek for 3 seasons. There's like a lot of, I love science fiction. I love genre material. I love, horror and fantasy, and that was a lot of fun. But I never wanted to be pigeonholed as that kind of a writer, and it was one of the reasons I wound up on first Hawaii, which was kind of failed NBC cop show, and then Desperate Housewives. Was I had gone to my agent at the time, and I said, I just don't want to get pigeonholed as this kind of writer. I want to do other stuff. And to answer your question, or as best I can, I guess, is the business model changes a lot, but the process doesn't really change. People ask me sometimes, how can you write on Star Trek and Desperate Housewives? It's like, well, writing's writing. Dramatic writing is
That's right.
And if you have a great set of characters and an interesting story to tell, it doesn't really matter if it's the Bridge of the Enterprise or Wisteria Lane.
Human drama is human drama, right?
Yeah, the job is the same.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's become a lot more corporatized. I feel there was a new era, and I don't think this is limited to streaming necessarily. I think it's sort of just a generational evolution of the business. I think there's a new generation of younger executives coming in who learned the business differently. Yeah. Who they do their jobs differently. There was the group of people I came in with were much more sort of in the trenches, like we're going to make a show, and you didn't have these kind of layers of, you know, corporate. It's kind of Lumen-like. You didn't have
right.
You know, these kind of layers. You didn't have to you didn't have to fill out a form, you know, to leave your, you know, to take a walk down the hallway. But in the streaming, the one thing I will say is doing 10 episodes or 13 or 8 or 9. Creatively is a lot more satisfying than doing those full freight network seasons. 22. When I was doing, I think we did 24 in a year.
Jeez.
And I look at it now, I go, it was crushing. It's like how, when we had much bigger staff, you know, you might have a staff of 13 or 14 or 15 people. You'd run 2 writers' rooms at the same time, you know, but it was like pushing out product on an assembly line and trying to stay ahead of the freight train of production versus doing something for streaming where you're only doing 8 or 10 episodes, where it feels like it's much more a kind of an artisanal, handcrafted product. I mean, you really have the time, you can take the care and attention to make it right. I mean, there were shows I worked on, and I don't want to, I mean, I always brought my A game and worked my hardest on everything I ever did, but there were times where doing it literally became triage, where you had a script where you're like, this doesn't work. This is not this is not going to be a good episode, but we have to move on. I mean, we have to, if we don't push this one through and move on to the next one, then, you know, the show's going to shut down. You know, you're just out of time. It becomes, at that point, it becomes a math problem. You know, you're just, you know, the physics just don't work anymore. But so in that sense, the streaming model, I think it's why there's an incredible explosion of shows, great quality drama shows like Severance.
I was blown away by Apple's production value, and it makes sense when you think about the price tag and their access to technology and their ability to court really good talent, you know, present company included, and it's amazing that they've kind of positioned themselves, unintentionally or intentionally, as this kind of sci-fi adjacent sphere. And it's a little magical. I have to say, it's magical. There's some magic.
And they're a tech company, so it kind of makes sense, right?
There's some magic happening.
Yeah.
Well, and it's weird because I talk to them when I talk to certain people who work there. They don't seem like big sci-fi people, and it's like they're. And I kind of want to say sometimes, well, look, you should look at your menu screen sometimes because, almost like, I mean, even stuff like Sugar, which I thought was a terrific show,
lots of fun.
It's like, I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but there's a big sci-fi twist in that.
Oh wait, don't tell me that. Hold on, I'm only on episode 3. No.
Well,
you'll get there. You know there is a twist. You don't know what
that's
it is.
right.
So
that's right.
Yeah.
I will date myself here a little bit by saying, so when I went to college, just on your point of how much television has changed in the style of television and the storytelling style of American TV, right?
Right.
Where when I went to college, it was the late 90s to 00s, and I didn't have a TV when I was in college, so I just kind of stopped watching television. It just wasn't in the cards for me. And when I got out, it took me a while to really ramp back up again, and it probably wasn't until the 2010s that I started to heavily get into television again, because somewhere right around 97, 98, that's when I started to fall off. And I would poke my head, and I had friends that would watch television all the time. So I got some X-Files, I got some of the ongoing Xena and Hercules and things like that were going on at the time. But I wasn't watching American TV. And by the time I came back, that prestige TV had taken off. Like Sopranos had happened, Oz had happened, The Wire had happened. And so that was almost my entry point back in, where I was like, oh, yeah, it doesn't have to be episodic.
Right.
It doesn't just have to be like, this episode is good, this episode is not. And you just sort of curate your own episode stash per show that you love to revisit, and then you skip the ones you're not so into. But the show itself, you would love the characters, you would love the concept, but there almost wasn't a story to a lot of them, like overarching wise. And I do think that prestige TV for better or for worse, like it did change television, and it has changed us. Because one thing that I did start to get back into before American TV started doing this was anime.
Absolutely.
And anime is one of those things where, 9 out of 10 animes are actually very finite and have an arc, and they're in there to get the job done. Like they're usually based on a manga. The manga had a beginning, middle, and end. They're telling that story. They're not padding it too much, and then they're getting to the and that blew my mind. I did not realize episodic TV could be just a story. And when American TV started doing that, that really brought me back to the fold. So I for one, am a huge fan of where we've gone. It
was kind of a British model or European model. It's
that's true. That's true. That's right. Yeah.
You take as many episodes as it takes to tell the story, and then you're done.
Yeah.
It's like when
6 episodes, you're done.
Exactly. Like how many episodes was it? Well, how many did it take to tell the story?
Right.
We did 5 or 6 or 7, and then the story ended, and so the show ended. But I think, and it was funny because, there was, and I'm a little older than you, it was very much, in the X-Files, and I was a huge X-Files fan. Mm-hmm. The X-Files was a cop procedural.
That's right. A perfect cop procedural, actually.
Yeah, it was. If it didn't have the sort of mythology and the alien element, it would it could have been like 2 beat cops in LA, or something like that. But it was that evolution towards a season-long overarching story. That it wasn't, they talk about it a lot, crime of the week or monster of the week or mystery of the week or whatever. It was like you could have those episodic elements. Where and Severance is that way too. That this is the episode about this. This is the episode where this happens. This is the episode where this person discovers this. The episode, the hour or so that you watch it, has a beginning and a middle and an end. But the story, the larger, it's more like a chapter in a book. The larger story that you're watching is the totality of the season or the series. And the funny thing is, a lot of times you don't know where that story is going. Like Desperate Housewives is a great example. Like I worked on the first 2 seasons of that show, which in my opinion, are the best 2 seasons.
Without question.
But that first season, the reason that first season is, whether it's your cup of tea or not, the reason that first season is so good is because Mark Cherry knew what that story was. He knew exactly where he was going. He knew what the mystery was. It's about these friends trying to figure out why their friend Mary Alice killed herself. And he knew why. He knew when we got to the end of those 20 some odd episodes, the mystery would be revealed.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't think Mark or anyone else or anyone at ABC realized what a phenomenon that show was going to be. And then suddenly it was like, well, you got to do another season. Right. You have to do more. And I don't think, I'm positive because I was there, Mark had not given a ton of thought to what the second season was.
Yeah, that happens. So you see that happening so often in really good shows that kind of surprise you and hook you. It's like sometimes those really great creators know exactly where that first arc is going, and it's seamless. The math is just perfect. It's just a great arc. And then the studio or the audiences say, hey, this is phenomenal. We need you to recreate that magic. And then it just kind of goes off the rails sometimes and sort of meanders.
Well, unless you're doing, I won't blame it all on the audience or the studio or the network, because unless you're doing a limited series, unless you're saying this by design, this is 8 episodes or 10 episodes and I'm done. Everybody wants a successful show. Mm-hmm. You want people to love it and want more of it. But a lot of us, I can only really speak for myself, but certainly a lot of people I know and work with, you're not thinking that far ahead. You get so into it now, like it's the job, and I'm sure you've had other people on your podcast who have talked about this, probably people associated with Severance included. The job of writing and producing an hour-long television series is a soul-crushing amount of work. It is an all-consuming. You don't see your family, you don't see your kids. It is a constant. I had to put my phone on silent to talk to you guys for an hour. It's like it never stops, and so you're not necessarily. All you're thinking about is the now. Like, I got to get through this episode. Right. I got to get through this season. If I can just get to next week without the show shutting down, I'm going to take that win. You're not thinking about, well, I wonder what season 2 or season 3.
That's right.
It's like, And then it kind of sneaks up on you, and they go, "Can you do 10 more?" You're like, "Yeah, sure."
Yes, and
you're not right. You're not going to say no, but then it's like, well,
You're not gonna say
now we
no.
got to tackle this. Now we got to get over this hill. Yeah.
then you go down some Jack and Coke and cry and move on with that life.
Exactly. Whenever an actor is up for a job, if they whatever they ask you, you can do. You say yes. It's like, "Can you write?"
Yep.
Sure. And then you run out and learn before you.
Right.
But yeah, it's it is a golden age, and that I can't, and I mean, I just said the job takes a tremendous amount of my time, but I love television. I love watching television. I love good television, and there is so much good television right now that I'm so far behind on everything that people are going, "Oh, have you watched Industry? Are you watching? Are you?"
Yeah, I'll never get caught up.
I know.
I still haven't made it all the way through Succession yet. It's
Same.
Yeah.
Not because I don't want to, but because I just don't have the.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we created this podcast half because it forces us to consume some media that we've just been sitting on for forever. And I'm like, now we have an excuse. We're doing something productive with our time. And everyone's like, "Oh, you have a podcast. True. You've seen everything." I'm like, no, not unless you've seen an episode about it.
Our lists are infinite. So you mentioned.
Partner's like, "Are you in there watching TV?" "I'm doing my job."
I'm working. Exactly. It's research. So you mentioned, Chris, the X-Files, and I'm curious. We'll jump back on track to Severance here in a moment, but I want to go back a little bit and hear what young Chris was watching. What's young Chris's fanboy sort of sphere? What were you into?
How far back?
As much anything you want to talk about. You are the subject here, my friend.
I grew up in Ohio. My mom loved movies. I mean, her generation, she loved horror movies. I mean,
good mom.
She dragged me when I was a teenager in 1979. My mother dragged me to see Alien. I didn't want to go because it seemed too
good mom.
And she really kind of instilled this love of film in me, and it was the sort of transformative thing for me was, I mean, it's a common enough story, was Star Wars. I was, what was that, 77? I was, I think 13, 14 that summer. And I went and saw that movie. My dad kept driving me to the movie theater. He was like, "Haven't you seen this movie?" It's like, and I thought I don't know, 10, 12, 15 times. And I came out of the movie theater and I was like, where did that guy go to school?
Yeah.
And George Lucas went to USC, so I applied to USC. I went to USC Film School, moved to California. We all thought at that time we were all going to be Steven Spielberg. We were going to be directors. And I had a couple of buddies of mine, some writer-producers, very talented writer-producers who I'd gone to film school with, named Tom Spezialy and Alan Cross, who started working in TV. And they were doing the show called Parker Lewis Campus.
Oh, yes.
Ooh, good one.
Half hour.
Great show.
And they just kept. I thought I was going to sell. I thought I was going to be Shane Black. Like I was going to sell my $1 million.
Absolutely. I still think that. Actually, I still think that about myself every day.
So I gave that up. But they were like, "Come do TV." They were like, "TV's like being back in film school." They were, we do.
Chill with all your buds and make stuff up.
Yeah, you hang out with your friends, and I don't remember. I don't know what the budget on Parker was, but they were like, they give us $500,000 a week to make a student film.
Good God.
Like, I was like, that sounds okay. So then they wound up creating, or developing and running Weird Science. I went to work for them, and I was like, they were right. It was great. I just loved working in television, and I started out in I'm trying to think. If that would have been 95, I want to say. And I guess X-Files was on. I was a huge X-Files fan. I was a big genre fan. I started, when I was younger, I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. I loved, and kind of, I don't know if it's a golden age or silver age, but Robert Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke and Larry Niven and, all that, all those, paperbacks that I would buy at the local mall. And I loved sci-fi. And I was a huge Star Trek fan. I loved Star Trek. I loved I just wasn't old enough to watch the original series in primetime, but it was in syndication. So I loved Star Trek, and then I loved Next Gen. And then when I got the opportunity to work on Enterprise, which was the show I worked on, one of the less successful Star Trek franchises, but it was like a dream come true. I mean, we shot it at Paramount on the same stages that they shot the other Star Trek shows on, and you would walk onto those sets and you could sit in the cabin chair on the bridge of the Enterprise. It was like, and there were people running around with phasers and pointed ears. It was like every day. I never take my career for granted. I mean, it's like that they still let me do this. Every day they let me on a studio lot. I feel like I should get on my hands and knees and kiss the ass. It's like they're still letting me do it. So I was a fan. It's like, I'm trying to think of specific. I mean, a lot of the shows we talked about, like The Sopranos, The Wire, Oz, like all that, that kind of the Davids, David Chase, David Milch, all those guys. I worked briefly on Mad Men, was one of my favorite shows.
Another one I haven't started yet, which I want to start soon.
It's good. Look, I mean, here's the thing about Mad Men. I worked there on season 5. It's a great show. It is one of the great shows of television. It's one of the great achievements of television. It's one of the single best, and I would put Severance up there. It's one of the single best television pilot scripts and pilot episodes I think that's ever been made. And I have a handful of them, I think.
It certainly has that reputation. Yeah.
And I think it's well deserved. I mean, I look at like the greatest pilots ever. I mean, like Brian Fuller writes great pilots. I thought his pilot for.
Oh yeah, we're only not commenting on it because I think me and Dallas have not seen Mad Men yet. So that's one of those shows that passed us. So I'm like, I can't talk intelligently about it, but I'm going to take it. But its reputation is as one of the greats.
No, but I guess the caveat I was going to say is it's not everybody's cup of tea. People, not everybody loves it. It's very funny. It's very smart. It's also very cynical and very dark.
Has a specific sense of humor. Yeah.
It has a very specific sensibility that I think, as brilliant as it is, and Matt Weiner is a brilliant writer, and that is one of those shows where like you can't pull a single piece of it out without it's like everything is perfect. But something can be good and you can still not like it. That's subjectivity. That's just taste. But it's definitely worth your time. It's a terrific show. It's like, but and there's a lot of great stuff on now. Like I said, I just watched all of Sugar. There's, what else am I watching? I mean, I watched The Bear. I was watching, all the stuff.
We're horrific wine nerds, so we have to shout out Drops of God. If you haven't
Drops of
dipped
God
into that yet.
I saw the pilot. I watched the first episode, which I thought was great, and then did not. Yeah. Not because I didn't like it, but because I watched.
That's part of the course around here.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of Fallout. I thought it was really.
I was surprised. I enjoyed that as a person who did not like the game. Yeah.
I did. I'm not a gamer, and so it wasn't. I wasn't familiar with the game. I hadn't played the game, so I wasn't fully sure what to expect. And it was one of those ones that was really watching the first couple episodes because it's very funny, but it's very violent, and you're kind of one of those ones where you're like, how am I supposed to be feeling when I'm watching this? Because I'm not sure.
Right.
It's terrific. Well, and that was, I think, Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, I think, who I was also a big fan of. Westworld, first couple seasons of Westworld, I thought were great, and there's so much good stuff. It's like it's more than I could ever conceive.
More than we can too. But Fallout, that's a sign of a good show. Like, you are not a gamer. I'm not a gamer either. So it's like you have no idea, you have no connection to the property, to the IP, quote unquote, and yet the show just works on its own. It's like you go right into it and it's like it wins you over. It has that reputation now. I think so many people, there's only so many gamers out there, and that show is a huge smash success. So I think that just sort of that is the spotlight.
Which is a testament to the adaptation and the writer's room and making sure that it stands on its own,
Right. Yeah. Well, you have to, and that was one of for the people who did like it, on the show I'm on now, Monarch, the best compliments that we got were from people who went, I wasn't a big Godzilla guy. I'm not a monsters, not a big sci-fi guy, but I really liked that. It really surprised me. It wasn't the show I expected.
Yeah.
And we took that as a great compliment because we tried as much affection and enthusiasm as Matt and I have for the kaiju genre and the Toho films and the MonsterVerse franchise. We knew we couldn't make a TV show about monsters. It's like we have to make a show about people who live in a world where monsters are real, and that's
which is why I would not have been great on that show, because it would have been one guy running away from all the monsters.
That's couldn't sustain that. You wouldn't get bored.
Oh no, everyone else would. I wouldn't, but everyone else would.
And also, Godzilla's expensive, man. We couldn't afford it.
Right.
Do that show. It's like you have to sort of choose the story you're going to tell, and it's funny because I talk to people. Godzilla, it's 10 episodes. Mm-hmm. Godzilla only actually appears on camera in about 4 minutes of screen time, but because he's hugely expensive. And we have a visual effects supervisor who insists, quite rightly, that every frame of it be feature caliber, that we couldn't do the cheap TV version of the show.
And boy, is it ever. I was blown away by the quality of that production.
We had an amazing team. Sean Conrad is his name, who's our visual effects supervisor. And he had worked on the 2014 Godzilla. He's phenomenal and an incredible perfectionist, and never settled for anything, less than excellence, and a great partner and a great guy to work with. But that becomes kind of the tricky. How do you tell the story? How do you make it feel like Godzilla's presence?
Right.
Yeah.
Is all over that.
That it's about him when he's not there.
Yeah.
When he's not at screen. And we did it by having this lead character who was traumatized by the attack on
It's Godzilla in the psyche, which is brilliant. Yeah.
It's the monster. He's the monster of her nightmares, who lives in her head. And Matt Fraction used to talk about it was, we would say it was supposed to be kind of like a 9/11 show. And Fraction would say it was more like a 9/12 show. That it was
the day after. Yeah.
It was what happens after. Like, how does your life change? How does your world change? When suddenly the monster.
Which, now that you say that, is a great title and theme for a show, 9/12. But go on. I mean, not that I need another pilot to write, because God knows my head is swimming.
You'll have to take that one.
I know, right?
So, out of curiosity, Chris, because in this later part of your career now, you've fallen in, of course, with Robert Kirkman and Skybound, and done Outcast and Invincible, and now Matt Fraction. So, did you fall? All these comic guys, was it a chain of events throughout all the comic folks, or how did you meet Fraction? How did you guys come to co-create this together?
It was it's kind of a series of happy accidents, really. It wasn't through, I know, look, I'm a comic fan. I wouldn't say I'm not an obsessive deep dive comic guy. I don't, I don't know every issue of every spinoff of every title, but I was more of a kind of a, like an 80s, 90s Frank Miller guy was kind of my heyday. But the Outcast job was just a job I was up for. I was looking for, the comic wasn't even out yet. They were developing it as a show. They had sold it to Cinemax series at the same time Robert was working on writing the comics. And I just got a meeting. It came to me through my agents, and they said, this is set up at Fox, and but Fox was the studio, Cinemax was the network, and they said it's set up, and they're looking for someone. It was a great pilot. It was another great, Robert had written a pilot. It was another fantastic pilot script, and they sent it to me and said, do you want to meet on this? And I said, yeah. And I went in, I took the meeting, and I met with a bunch of the producers, and then I sat down with Robert, and Robert and I just got along great. And Robert was like, all right, you're the guy. It's like, and so I did that, and then kind of the same thing. Oh, and then the Invincible thing was, Robert, the show had gotten picked up at Amazon, and they didn't have a writer's room per se. It's being run by this wonderful writer named Simon Rasiopa, who's incredibly talented, and another great guy is Canadian, writer who lives here now. And he and Robert just said, let's just get a bunch of people in a room and we'll figure out the first half dozen episodes or so. So Robert just called and said, hey, you want to...
Crazy. I love it.
He was like, you want to come down to the Skybound offices? He goes, you want to come down for a week and hang out and we'll break an episode and write one? And I was like, sure.
It's still like college. It's still like film school.
Yeah, I had never done animation before.
Okay.
But it was great. It was great fun. I think it's the third episode of the first season, and it was a blast. It was really fun. Simon was awesome. It was fun to work with Robert again.
Did you find any difference on the subject of animation? Like, was there anything distinct about writing for animation from your POV, or?
The funny thing for me, and I had only done that one episode, what was surprising to me was how not different it was that, because I thought, oh, you can do anything you want, you just draw it. I thought it was going to be so much easier than doing, you don't have to worry about sets or locations. It's like, I can make the thing anything I want. And Simon was like, no, actually, because designing and drawing those sets, it's like building a set.
Right.
It's like, one costs money. You can't just change it. And so it's like, if it was what the surprising revelation for me was, it really wasn't that different from doing a live action show. All the same kind of production limitations applied. The one thing that was a big deal was the lead time, though, because from the time I wrote that episode to the time it finally aired, I'd have to ask Simon. It was like at least 2 years.
Yeah.
It may have been longer than that. And then the same thing with meeting Matt. Fraction was like, the project was set up. Legendary, who does and produces and owns the big, feature franchise, the big feature movies. Oh, and ironically, Adam Wingard, who directed the last two big Godzilla movies, I know Adam because he directed the pilot to Outcast.
Okay.
I did not know that. Okay, cool.
But it was the same kind of, just not through me chasing a project or wanting to work with a particular person. It was like, I had been friends with one of the executives at Legendary, and we'd known each other for years. And he's like, we're trying to develop our feature franchise as a TV series. And it's set up at Apple. We're working with this great writer, Matt Fraction, but for whatever reason, we just can't get it across the finish line at Apple. They're just not, it doesn't feel like an Apple show. They won't commit to it. They're afraid of the kaiju element or whatever. He said, do you want to come in and talk to Matt? And I was like, sure. So I came in and met Matt. We hit it off. We started pitching ideas. We kind of came up with this idea of this young woman who discovers her father has a second family. And then she goes off on this quest to find out what his secrets were, which then leads her into the world of Godzilla and Kaiju and Monarch. And once we kind of came up with sort of the human character way into it, Apple was like, oh, that's the kind of show we'll do.
Right. Family drama. We get this.
Totally, 100%.
Yeah.
And so they were all, it was funny, I wound up working with these incredible, like, kind of luminaries of the comic book world.
For sure. Oh, yeah.
But not through any, not like chasing comics. It was all through just kind of weird trying to get and keep a job in Hollywood and calling my agent what's out there.
Well, I think that's, again, a kind of testament to both sides, because what happens with these comic book storytellers often is, these worlds are just so vast and almost infinite that you do need someone who is well-versed in the art of movie making, of the business, the math, of getting it done, in order to find a way to make it kind of, native to television, for lack of a better term. And sounds like a pairing made in heaven.
It certainly has been thus far for me. And writing television is a specific skill. It is, and there are certain brilliant shows that kind of break out, that do things differently and break out of the mold. And but there is a specific craft and skill set to doing television, and I think what worked great, like in a lot of those pairings, me working with Robert or me working with Matt, is they brought that kind of, imagination and brilliance and comic book thinking, and I was the guy. I was like the old grizzled TV hack. I was like, okay, here's how you make a TV.
Well, you got them past the pitch,
which is what they were looking for.
So it's like that. Yeah.
I just to wrap it up, that it has been the pleasure of my career to work with so many great people. I would never have had a chance to work with guys like Robert or Matt, if I hadn't found my way into this sphere.
And I love to hear that the people you're working with now are some of the nicest people, like that, as far as you can tell. Like you're like, I love the people I'm working with now even more, like as wonderful as the people were that you worked with before. You're like, and it just keeps getting better, which is not always
rare. So bravo, my friend.
Yeah. There are bumps. There are.
Okay.
You bump, but on the whole, it's been great.
And what did you take? What have you kept from the Xena set? That's all I want to know.
I don't think I have anything. I don't have anything from Xena. I have this thing. There was an episode of Weird Science that was a parody of the X-Files.
Yeah. And
there was a character from the X-Files who was like the bounty hunter, and he had this little ice pick thing where do you remember?
Yeah.
So we built this prop where every time he pushed the button, something different would come out. And so the one I got was Fork.
I love that.
So he would keep it, like he'd go to kill someone and it would be a spoon, or and I kept the
love
the fork.
That. Love that.
The true deadly one. Okay, that's going up as a short.
I know for sure.
That is beautiful.
I have my Godzilla water.
Nice. Gosh. Oh.
I can send you. I have some. You guys let me know where you're at. I'll send you. I have a bunch of these. We had the art department. I don't know if you've seen the show, but in the beginning of Monarch, there's a whole bit where there's like a monster alert, and then people go into
beautiful.
The art department made all these great signs, like kaiju shelters, and they have pictures of, and
God, please.
I
please send me one of those.
Let me know where to.
We will definitely. Oh God, please send me one of those.
Yeah, Dallas is on the East Coast right now. I'm in LA with you. If you're in LA right now, which I'm assuming you probably are. Beautiful. So yeah, and Dallas is usually in LA. He's just been trapped on the East Coast for better part of a year at this point. But in any event, segueing into Severance.
Well, without all the stuff we discussed, we would make it to Severance. So, that's what
we wouldn't. So, yeah, and how did you come? Of course, the first question, how did you come to be involved in Severance? And when you first became involved in, actually, we'll start there, and then we'll see. You might answer this next question just by telling me how you came to be involved in Severance. So go with that.
Well, it was the same answer to like how I wound up working with Robert and with Matt. I was looking, as all of us always are, looking for your next gig. And I had written some pilots, and I wasn't, I wasn't working at the time, and I'm always looking for stuff. And I have a really good agent who's always has his ear to the ground for me. And he said the script came in, and it's set up at Apple, and it was written by a young first-time writer, and they're looking for someone to come in and kind of help him hire writers, set up the room, break the season, just kind of show them the ropes, and do you want to read the script? I said, sure. And it was Dan's script to Severance, and I read it, and I was like, this is one of the most brilliant hours of television I've
So you felt that from the first reading? You see, that was...
first reading. The other thing, too, is I will say that of all in my career, that first script, what Dan wrote, it's like that scene in Amadeus when Salieri realizes that there was no corrections on the page. Right. It's like it just poured out of Mozart's head onto the page. Right. It's like I feel like that's like Dan. It's like that script changed less from the version of what I first read to what that pilot episode is. It changed less than almost anything I've ever seen because it was just so good. You didn't want to mess with it. It's like,
there were to have won so many people over to get the show made that it's like, you extrapolate from there, but leave that as is because that's what everyone's excited to work on.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that was kind of one of the things that I was most proud of in working with Dan because he was to some extent such a babe in the woods that, it was like, I really I felt part of my job was to sort of protect his vision, and
Nice.
because, you would go through a notes process or a development process, and there's a lot of, not that people aren't smart or talented, but you're pulled in a lot of different directions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen.
Right.
You're getting notes from producers, you're getting notes from the network, some of which are good, some of which are not so good, or not true to Dan's vision, or not what makes that show unique and special. And I remember having conversations with Dan where we're getting a set of notes that we didn't necessarily agree with, and him being like, "What are we going to do?" And and he would be kind of panicked, like it was like and I would be like, "Don't panic, we're not going to do those." It's like, and he would be like, "Well, what do you mean? We have to do the notes." And I'm like, "No, we don't. We don't have to do all the notes. We do the good notes, and then everything else becomes a conversation. And we'll talk to them. And if there's stuff that we want to fight, we'll fight." It's like, but we have to fight. We have to fight for your vision of the show, because it was such a special and unique piece of material that, to some extent, I don't think everybody understood it. I think a lot of the pressure, I won't even necessarily say pressure, but a lot of the kind of guidance we were getting felt like it was sanding kind of the sharp edges off of it. Right. And how do we make this feel like a more recognizable, normal hour of television? And I think what I was really proud of was kind of having Dan's back and basically saying, "Don't let them fuck with this," and one of the things I'm really proud of is we spent, so Dan and I met, we hit it off. They hired me on the show. We hired a great group of writers, a lot of whom I still work with and have worked with in the past. Amanda Overton, Andy Colville, Kerry Drake, Helen Lay, who's on Invincible now, just this Anna Munch, just this incredible, talented group of writers, and we all came together and we broke that season. We had 24 weeks in the writers' room. Dan wrote the first 2 episodes. Dan, the writers of record wrote drafts of all those scripts, but at the end of the day, they all kind of ran through Dan. Right. It was brilliant process. Yeah. Everything was like, once Dan laid hands on it, it became Severance.
Right.
But after the room ended, and then the show moved to New York, and the writers kind of disbanded, and we were not necessarily invited to continue to participate in that process. And Dan went, and I think Anna went, and they had a very small, kind of contained group of people. And I moved on. I went and started developing Monarch. And then when the show, and it was a long process, there was COVID. Right. I think I wasn't there. I think there were production challenges. It was a very expensive show. And when it finally aired, I was talking to Andy Colville about it, and it was like, Andy was going, the thing that surprised me most was how not surprised I was, because it was the show we broke. It was what we did. It was all the work we did in the room. It was the episodes we put on the board, and at the end of the day, the
structure remained the same. Yeah,
the structure really remained. It was funny. I think, ironically, the episode that changed the most was the one that has my name, because there was, I don't want to get into plot details, but there was there was like a big swing plot move that happened in episode 8.
Oh, was that when the alien arrived? No,
I cannot confirm. But it clearly, at the end of the day, it didn't fly, which was totally fine, and it wound up, and stuff moved around too. That was the other thing, like that. The original draft of episode 8 that I wrote had Bert's retirement in it. It had the scene where Irving goes looking for Bert, and he goes and he walks in the party, and he realizes, and he kind of blows up, and he goes, "You're just going to let him die." It was like, that was in my head. And then
the one before, right?
That's a great scene. That's a great scene.
Moved from 7. And but then it got to the end, and it was funny because the order was originally for 10. I don't know if Dan told you this. The order was originally for 10.
Yes.
And what is now episode 10 was Dan's episode 9, and it was the cliffhanger kind of end of the season was originally the cliffhanger episode episode number 9. It was 9 and 10 were kind of like a 2-part finale. There was there was like a whole episode that came after that. So I wasn't, again, I don't want to speak for the production or for Dan or Ben because I wasn't there, but at some point a decision was made to just not produce that.
Do you think they knew they would have another season and maybe that made them braver to have a cliffhanger in that regard, or?
I don't know. I think probably they may have had a sense internally that they really had something special and that they were betting on success as they should have. But I don't know what the process was. I don't know what the decision made was, but it ends. The funny thing is it ends beautifully where it does. It's it's a great season. It's a great season finale, but it was never designed to be the season finale.
Right. But it's funny because most of the commentary online, like for anyone who finishes that show, is just people being like, are you shitting me? That's where it ends. Like you're literally going to leave it off there and make me wait at this point years for the next one because of course the strikes and whatnot. So everyone's been waiting an extra long time for that continuation.
We originally weren't going to. Originally there was a 10th episode. There was another episode after.
Yeah.
To be fair, also ended on a cliffhanger. So whether it had ended at 9 or 10, there still would have been that. Are you shitting me? Like that,
which is good. I mean, people say that in a good way. They don't mean they're upset. I mean, they're upset, quote unquote. But in that they're so like, I have to know. I have to. Give me the next. I want to binge season 2 now. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, when we come across these shows, we're talking about sort of the difference between the shows of the '90s, the early aughts, and the noughts, and now in streaming. I tell you, this is the show I absolutely would have waited 2 weeks between episodes because I binged this one, of course, because I came to the party late. I would have checked in every week to watch this show, and not a lot of streaming shows have that kind of inertia, that kind of staying power, I suppose, because it just satisfies every desire I have in a narrative form. So it's fantastic, man.
Dallas is a tough audience member. I will freely call him out on that. He is tough to find things to enjoy with him. And the fact that he watched Severance and came to me and was like, we need to talk about this show. I was like, okay, that's unlike you. All right, let's do this.
He is a man of discerning
taste. That's right, absolutely.
But it was appointment television, and appointment television doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, I think for me, probably the last appointment television was probably Game of Thrones, where it was like, whenever they were on Sunday nights or whatever, and it's like, and then you had to wait, oh my God, I have to wait a week. It's like, I can't, and I used to watch, I was a big fan. The show, I think, ran really hot and cold. There were great seasons and not great seasons, but I was a big fan of 24. Okay. And so... And 24 was another one of those shows where it would be like you just had to wait. It's like, but yeah, you don't. I am, and maybe it's just my age or I'm a little old school, but I'm with you, Dallas. I like the idea of appointment television. It's like
it slows things down. It doesn't, you get a chance to kind of just sit in it and discuss it. And the other thing is, go.
No, that's exactly, you can discuss it. And we were watching, Game of Thrones was still running when we were in the Severance writers' room. So when we would come in on Monday morning, literally the first hour of Monday, every day in the Severance writers' room was arguing about how shitty. And that was part of the joy and the experience of watching a show like that.
True. So true.
Well, and I think even though we can binge things these days, still shows like Succession, right, will still capture people that way, where even if they're binging a whole season, then of course you got to discuss that season while you're waiting for the next season, and that becomes what everyone talks about for 5 or 6 months or what have you. But I do feel like the binging thing, like I'm not a big binging fan either. I'm like, you can watch it as fast as you want, but 1 episode a week is 2 episodes a week. Like, slow down, let it. And I think especially something like Severance, let it percolate, let it digest it, and then move on to the next one. Like, it's so much. It gets so much more out of it that way.
Yeah, it really is an extraordinary show.
It is.
I mean, it is.
It is.
It was it was a uniquely brilliant idea. So rare in this business, and I've been in this business a while, where everything is derivative of something else.
Yes.
And it's Die Hard, meet whatever. It's like, this was like, there were no comps for Severance. There was like, it was to read something, and it was one of those just the sort of the purity of that idea was one of those ones you were like, why did I not think of this? How did I not think of this?
Yeah.
This is so brilliant and so just crystalline in its perfection. It's like it was, and you obviously know the story that because Dan told it many times that he was working in a door factory and he just hated his job so much that he just imagined, if only I could take this part of my day and just compartmentalize it and put it away and never have to think about it. And that was, the genesis of the idea. But it's just to see something that astonishingly original in this business.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cliche to compare it to something like Twin Peaks, but it's really hard to find anything else on TV to directly compare it to.
Yeah. And then to give credit where credit is due, Ben, who's like a really brilliant director, kind of visualized that show. I mean, a lot of the look of the show was from Dan's script. I mean, the sort of the lighting and the low ceilings and the cubicles and this idea of this kind of infinite kind of backrooms labyrinth that they work in, and the severed floors and all that stuff. It's all really vividly described in the script about, and even the town where Mark lives, and the place where he finds Petey hiding out in the woods and all that stuff. It's all in the script, but Ben really, he's a brilliant director. It's beautifully shot. The production design is gorgeous. It's that cast is just it's an incredible
great cast. The casting is just out of this world. I can't even imagine anyone else in any of the roles. You can't even imagine.
Well, and that was really Ben. I mean, Ben knew, he had obviously had worked with most of those actors before. He had just done Dan Amora with Patricia Arquette, and he knew Adam from Walter Mitty, and it was like he knew what these actors could do, and he knew what they would bring to the parts. And Ben Stiller is the kind of guy too, where if you go, who should play this, Christopher Walken,
right?
And you're like
inspired. That relationship between those two is just inspired.
Well, and you're like, yeah, sure, right. Like, great, yeah, well, Christopher Walken, and then Ben Stiller makes a phone call.
Christopher Walken.
It really is just a beautiful, thoughtful, extraordinary piece of work, and it started with Dan's writing, but it was, it was really, every component of it. It's just really.
And I had no idea that Ben Stiller was even associated with the show until I was like in episode 3. I was like, this is Ben Stiller. Well, there must be another Ben Stiller.
No, they were the ones who discovered it, and I'm sure you've heard the story. Dan had written it as a spec, and it wound up on this thing called the Blood List,
which just went away last year. I think ended this past. Yeah.
And one of the executives at Red Hour, which is Ben's company, had read it, and they attached themselves to it with Ben to produce and direct, and they got it set up at Apple. So it was really Ben and his company.
Well, yeah, and according to Dan, that was, Ben's response to it. Like everywhere else he took meetings with, it was all like, "Oh yeah, this is interesting. Let's talk about another show for you to write on," type of a thing. And Ben was the first one that was like, "This, I want to make this." Yeah. And it's like, no, I can totally, and I can hear those meetings where it's like, this is really, you're a really interesting writer. What else do you have?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like, we're not
interesting is interesting, but we're not making it right.
But it was a ballsy move. It was a ballsy move on Red Hour's part, on Ben's part, on Apple's part.
Agreed.
And there were people inside, Ben obviously, but people inside Red Hour and Apple who knew what this was, who knew how special. There were people who didn't get it. I mean, there were people we were working through this process. There were people who respected Dan's talent and respected Ben, and who wanted to be in business with those people, but didn't get it. Right. And there were other people who did. There were other people who just saw it for, like, Twin Peaks, I think, is a great example. It's like, it's something like,
right. You need some cheerleaders to get it to the finish line. Yeah, always. Yeah. Yeah. So, quick question for you, Chris. Just out of curiosity, I have no idea if this is any relation or if it was you that snuck this in to the show, but you did write a pilot back in 2015, directed by Joe Johnson, that was called Lumen.
That's
Lumen.
it.
Right.
And I have to wonder, did you you're like, as a legacy, let me pluck that name, and like, I think this is going to fit nicely.
Have you been dropping Easter eggs your entire career, Chris?
Here's a prop.
Oh, cool. Gorgeous.
That's cool.
This was, but you know, it's with an E.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I don't. That is total coincidence. Dan
sure, Chris. Sure.
Dan, because Dan had written that. That was in the script. That was the Lumen. And I think in his original script it was spelled with an E, and then it didn't clear legally, so they had to change it. But no, I had done that pilot. It was for TNT. Amblin produced it, and Joe, and I was huge. Working with Joe was like, oh, you're the dude who designed the Millennium Falcon. Right. It's like you're the guy who put the dent in Boba Fett's helmet. It's like, you know, like that was one of those kind of geek out moments. And Joe was great, and I loved working with Joe, and I loved his movies. I loved The Rocketeer and October Sky, and you know, I think he's an enormously talented guy and just a really nice guy. But it was weird. We developed it. It was a big kind of family, very Spielbergian kind of family friendly fantasy show. It was supposed to, TNT had the show called Falling Skies that was going away, and they were looking for like a sci-fi tentpole show to
another very good pilot, as far as I remember. Falling Skies, I think.
Yeah, it was. And so we did this thing, and in the middle, we shot it in New Zealand. It was great. It was a nice little piece. I was really proud of it, but literally in the middle of production, there was a big regime change at TNT, and the people who would commission the pilot were out, and there was a whole new people in, and so it just kind of quietly went away, which was disappointing. But that was it. I loved working with Joe. That was a lot of fun. But no, I can take no credit for Lumen. That was completely that was from Dan's script.
Beautiful. And one more, kind of going way back for you to the beginning. Out of a question for you. So one of my like near and dear to my heart things that your name is on, and I'm very curious as to what this story is for you, but you have a story by credit on this movie called Masterminds.
Masterminds.
That was something me and my college bestie like rented back in the day, and we're just like, this is great. This is so much fun. And we just watched it, and I was like, okay, now you wanted to be a movie guy originally. By any chance, was that just one of the ones that actually went somewhere? Like they might have, because you only have story by credit, maybe someone else rewrote it, but you got the story, or was that one of your scripts, or no?
It was not one of my scripts. That was a really funny story. I was working, before I got my first writing job in TV, I was working as a story analyst, as a script reader in the feature department at 20th Century Fox. And through a friend of mine who was an executive, there was a writer, a guy named Floyd Byers, who had written, I want to say, like Desperately Seeking Susan. I can't remember. He had some big credit. Credit from like the 80s. I can't remember what it was. I have to look it up. But he was trying to do this kind of action movie, like it was Die Hard Jr. It was basically Die Hard in a private, boarding school, rich kids boarding school. And he didn't really do action, and I was like a big action movie guy, And this friend of ours had said, you should talk to Floyd, and see if you can help him. So I met with Floyd, and I just read his script and gave him a bunch of notes. I literally did my job. I was like, I read the script and I gave him a bunch of script notes, and he paid me a little money. I think I bought a new computer with it at the time. But then he said, when I get this movie made, I'm going to give you a credit on it. And I was like, sure. Like, great, thanks. And he went out and got Patrick Stewart attached.
Crazy.
And got the movie made. I joke, Floyd Byers, last honest man in Hollywood. He got the movie made, and put my name on it and gave me a source credit on it, and which I totally do not deserve, but he was a man of integrity.
Yeah, promise is a promise.
That's right.
He promised, and he said he was going to do it, and he did it.
That's beautiful.
That's awesome.
God.
All right, beautiful.
Yeah, the last honest man in Hollywood is another great title.
There it is.
But no, I'm glad you enjoy. If I ever run into Floyd, I'll tell you that there was someone else.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, please do. Please do. And then tell him to come on the podcast. We'd love
That's right. We would.
If you run into him again. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps us up here. We're a little over an hour, so that's our perfect timing. Thank you so much for being here, Chris, and giving us some insight on your job in Severance. I mean, this TV show, you should be so proud of everything, no matter how much you can or cannot claim to every little detail that's on that screen. It's like that show, you oversaw it, it came together, and I think we're all excited for season 2 and to figure out where this goes from here. I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to know what they do for season 2.
Oh, me too. I had a drink with Dan a few weeks ago, and he won't tell me anything.
I know.
That's the worst.
And Chris, I'm sorry, we forgot your drink. So we always ask our guests. No, go ahead. We did ask Chris. We're going to see what he does here. But we always ask our guests to, of course, pair a beverage with the show. We asked him, look, Severance, Chris basically already said, he's like, by the time you're done making one of these things and you've seen it over and over and over again, it's certainly not a drink-worthy experience anymore. But nevertheless, to the best of your ability, what would you drink while watching Severance, Chris?
Well, it's funny because there's two answers to that question. It's like what is a Severance drink? Like what is a kind of a thematically appropriate drink to watch the show? Like what pairs with the show, which is not the same question as what do I drink? Like what would I? And I'm not a big wine guy.
That's okay.
I like if someone says this is good, you should drink it. I'll go, oh, okay, good.
Is that all you got? Sure.
I'm more of a beer guy, and I've been drinking these.
Oh yeah, the Cali Squeeze.
Cali Squeeze from SLO Brewery up in San Luis Obispo.
Oh, nice.
Which I think are refreshing and delicious. So that's what I've been drinking.
All right, that's beautiful.
And
so there you go, guys. Give it a try.
That's right. What do you got coming up? What's besides the next seasons of the Monarch series?
We're working on season 2 of Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. We've been in the writers' room. We were interrupted by the strike, but we're back. We're working on scripts. We just started production. We're shooting season 2 now in Australia. And it should be out. The time between seasons on these things is insane, but it should be out in like towards the end of next year. I think November. We don't have an official air date, but I think it'll probably November 2025.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're very excited. The show did very well. Apple was very pleased with it, and I'm more than happy to spend more time with you.
Yeah. And so once again, everybody, go get an Apple TV Plus subscription because Monarch Season 2 and Severance Season 2, they are both upcoming fast-ish. Yeah. but have your subscription ready to go and watch Season 1 while you're waiting. Thanks so much for being here, Chris. We will be back next week, everybody, with another wine and entertainment pairing for your entertainment. But this concludes our coverage of Severance Season 1. Ciao for now. We will catch you later. Thanks to all the listeners.
Thanks, guys.